wrong. For a few days, the news media made a fuss over the visitor, but because only two facts were known about it, its unusual orbit and its approximate size, the world soon forgot about Rama. But the astronomers did not. Their excitement grew in the passing months as the new asteroid presented them with more and more puzzles. First of all, there was the problem of Rama's light curve. All new asteroids showed a variation in their brilliance, waxing and waning in a period of a few hours, an inevitable result of their spin and their irregular shape. Rama showed no such changes. Either it was not spinning at all, or it was perfectly symmetrical. Both explanations seemed unlikely. There the matter rested for several months. An astronomer with access to the far side 200-meter reflector made the discovery. The sunlight reflected from Rama showed a very small variation. Rama was spinning. But whereas the normal day for an asteroid was several hours, Rama's was only 4 minutes. At its equator, this tiny probe must be spinning at more than 1,000 kilometers an hour. An object 40 kilometers across, with a rotation period of only 4 minutes. Where did that fit into the astronomical scheme of things? Perhaps Rama was a dead sun, a collapsed star, a madly spinning sphere of neutronium, every cubic centimeter weighing billions of tons. But Rama could not possibly be made of condensed matter. No star-sized mass could penetrate so deeply into the solar system without producing disturbances that would have betrayed it long ago. No, it was utterly impossible for an object as massive as a dead sun to sneak up unobserved. In a way, it was a pity. An encounter with a dark star would have been quite exciting, while it lasted. The extraordinary meeting of the Space Advisory Council was brief and stormy. The question before the council was straightforward enough. There was no doubt that Rama was an unusual object, but was it an important one? In a few months it would be gone forever, so there was little time in which to act. A space probe soon to be launched from Mars to go beyond Neptune could be modified and set on a high-speed trajectory to meet Rama. There was no hope of a rendezvous, for the two bodies would pass each other at 200,000 kilometers an hour. Rama would be observed intensively for only a few minutes, and in real close-up for less than a second. But with the right instrumentation, that would be long enough to settle many questions. 3 months later, the space probe was launched from Phobos, the inner moon of Mars. The first images from 10,000 kilometers away brought to a halt the activities of all mankind. No one could pretend any longer that Rama was a natural object. Its body was a cylinder, geometrically perfect and 50 kilometers long. The two ends were quite flat, apart from some small structures at the center of one face, and were 20 kilometers across. Rama looked almost comically like an ordinary domestic boiler, dull, drab gray, and completely devoid of markings. The images from the other cameras added nothing new. However, the trajectories their pods traced through Rama's minute gravitational field gave one other vital piece of information: the mass of the cylinder. It was far too light to be a solid body. To nobody's great surprise, it was clear that Rama must be hollow. The long hoped for, long feared encounter had come at last. Mankind was about to receive the first visitor from the stars. Commander Norton remembered those first TV transmissions, which he'd replayed so many times during the final minutes of the rendezvous. But there was one thing no electronic image could possibly convey, and that was Rama's overwhelming size. He never received such an impression when landing on a natural body like the Moon or Mars. Those were worlds, and one expected them to be big. His judgment was coldly altered by the fact that this was an artifact, millions of times heavier than anything that man had ever put into space. Norton had looked long and hard at the northern face of Rama, choosing the point of touching him. After much thought, he decided to avoid the clearly marked circular disc that was centered on the pole. He had a strong suspicion that this must be the outer seal of an enormous airlock. It was the a plane, gaining speed at 1,000 kilometers an hour. Fortunately, Rama's designers had provided an answer. Equally spaced around the polar axis were three low pillbox-shaped structures, about 10 meters in diameter. If Endeavour touched down between any two of these, the centrifugal drift would fetch her up against them, and she would be held firmly in place.
Contact in 15 seconds,
Said Calvert. The gray pillboxes drifted slowly upward outside the control port. Commander Norton had wondered what he would say at this moment. But now that it was upon him, history chose his words, and he spoke almost automatically.
Rama base. Endeavour has landed.
Endeavour and Rama were heading sunward like a single body. In 40 days, they would reach perihelion and pass within 20 million kilometers of the sun. That was too close for comfort. Long before then, Endeavour would have to use her remaining fuel to nudge herself into a safer orbit. The crew would have perhaps 3 weeks of exploring time before they parted from Rama forever. Rama was silent as a tomb. No electrical currents, no radioactivity. It was almost ominously quiet. One would have expected that even an asteroid would be noisier. On the first EVA, Norton took only one companion, Lieutenant Commander Carl Mercer, his tough and resourceful life support officer. The nearest pillbox was only 10 meters from the airlock, and Norton's first concern was to check the circular structure to determine its purpose. He traveled only a few meters when he came across an interruption in the smooth, apparently metallic wall. 6 radio grooves, or slots, were deeply recessed in the middle, and lying in them were 6 crossed bars, like the spokes of a Rimmels wheel. He noticed that there were deeper recesses at the ends of the spokes, nicely shaped to accept the clutching hand. A slowly opening clamshell. A few particles of dust driven by wisps of escaping air streamed outward like dazzling diamonds as the brilliant sunlight caught them. The road to Rama lay open. The Rama Committee met at the United Planet headquarters on the moon. 7 colleagues, each representing one of the members of the United Planets, were all present, as were specialists who had been co-opted to the committee. Dr. Bowes had been born on Earth and had not emigrated to Mars until he was 30, so he felt that he could view the political situation very dispassionately. Professor Davison was an old acquaintance. The exobiologist, Carlo Herrera, was another obvious choice. So was Dennis Sokolowski, the science historian. Bowes was slightly less happy about the presence of Conrad Taylor, the celebrated anthropologist who had made his reputation by uniquely combining scholarship and eroticism in his study of puberty rights in late 20th century Beverly Hills. No one, however, could possibly have disputed the right of Sir Lewis Sands to be on the committee, a man whose knowledge was matched only by his urbanity. Sir Lewis was reputed to lose his composure only when called the Arnold Toynbee of his age. Dr. Bowes, His Excellency the Ambassador from Mars to the United Planets, called his wandering thoughts to order and said,
Gentlemen, the committee is now assembled to deal with the unique situation. The directive that the Secretary General has given us is to evaluate that situation and to advise Commander Norton when necessary.
"It is Commander Norton," said Sir Robert McKay, the ambassador from Earth. "It is a tremendous responsibility. What sort of person is he?" "I can answer that," said Professor Davidson. His fingers flew over the keyboard of his memory pad. He frowned at the screen full of information and started to make an instant synopsis. William St. Norton, born 2077, Brisbane, Oceania. Educated Sydney, Bombay, Houston. Then 5 years at Astrograd, specializing in propulsion. Commissioned in 2102, rose through the usual ranks, lieutenant on the 3rd Persephone expedition. itself during 15th attempt to establish base on Venus. Exemplary record. Dual citizenship, Earth and Mars. Wife and one child in Brisbane. Wife and two in Port Lowell, with option of third. Wife? Asked Taylor innocently. No, child, of course, said the professor before he caught a grin on the other's face. Appointed commanding officer, Solar Survey Research Vessel, Endeavour. First voyage to retrograde satellites of Jupiter. Thought it was a tricky one.
The record proves only that he is competent, objected the ambassador from Mercury. How would he react in a novel situation like this?
The historians are loose ends of their disclaimer.
If Rome is dead or unoccupied,
And so far, all the evidence suggests that it is. Motive is in the position of an archaeologist discovering the ruins of an extinct culture. The danger is minimal. Sir Robert interjected. We still have the possibility of an active inhabited realm. An encounter between two cultures is almost invariably disastrous for one or for both parties. The argument had reached the takeoff point and was now self-sustaining. Bo sat back in his chair, said little, and waited for a consensus to emerge. It was just as he had predicted. Everyone agreed that once he had opened the first door, it was inconceivable that Commander Norton should not open the second. If his wives ever compared his videograms, Commander Norton thought with more amusement than concern. It would involve him in a lot of extra work. Sorry, I'm day late with this transmission, said Norton. But I've been away from the ship for the last 3 hours, believe it or not. Don't be alarmed. Everything's going perfectly. It's taken us 2 days, but we're almost through the airlock complex. We could have done it in a couple of hours if we'd done what we do now, but we took no chances. Set remote cameras in hand and cycled all the locks a dozen times to make sure they wouldn't seize up behind us after we'd gone through. The rods really made sure of things. There are 3 of these cylinder locks, one after the other, just inside the outer hull and below the entry pillbox. And that's only the beginning. The final lock opens into a straight corridor, almost half a kilometer long. It looks clean and tidy like everything else we've seen. These people seem to have done everything in threes. We're in the final lock chamber now, waiting for the okay from Earth before we go through. The interior of Rama is only a few meters away. I'll be a lot happier when the suspense is over. You know, back at the beginning of the 20th century, an archaeologist found the tomb of an Egyptian king, the first one that hadn't been looted by robbers. I feel a bit like he must have. Perhaps this place is also a tomb. It seems more and more likely. Even now, there's still not the slightest sign or hint of any activity. Well, tomorrow we should know. Norton switched the recorder to hold. By the time they saw these images and heard these words, he would be inside Rommel. For better or for worse. No one had spoken over the radio circuits for at least 5 minutes. Mercer had simply given the okay sign and had waved him toward the open tunnel. Norton flicked on the beam of his flashlight, triggered his jets, and drifted slowly down the short corridor, trailing his safety line behind him. Only seconds later, he was inside. Inside what? All before him was total darkness, and a clear light was reflected back from the beam. He drifted slowly through the darkness, until the momentum dampened and the end of the safety line brought him gently to a halt. He swept the beam of the flashlight down from the nothingness ahead to examine the surface from which he had emerged. He might have been hovering over the center of a small crater. On either side rose a complex of terraces and ramps, all geometrically precise and obviously artificial. About 100 meters away, he could see the exits of the other 2 airlock systems, identical with this one. And that was all. There was nothing particularly exotic or alien about the scene. was at one end of a hollow cylinder at least 10 kilometers wide. From his viewpoint at the central axis, he could see a massive detail on the curving wall surrounding it. All around him, the terraced slopes of crater rose up until they merged into the solid wall that rimmed the sky. No, the impression was false. He must discard the instincts both of Earth and of space and reorientate himself to a new system of coordinates. He was not at the lowest point of this strange inside-out world, but the highest. From here, all directions were down, not up. If he moved away from the central axis, toward the curving wall, gravity would steadily increase. When he reached the inside surface of the cylinder, he could stand upright on it at any point, feet toward the stars, and head toward the center of the spinning drum. The concept was familiar enough, since the earliest dawn of spaceflight, centrifugal force had been used to simulate gravity. It was only the scale of this application that was so overwhelming. The tube of landscape that enclosed him was mottled with areas of light and shade that could have been forests, fields, rows of lakes, or towns. The distance and the fading illumination of the flare made identification impossible. Narrow lines that could be highways, canals, or well-drained rivers formed a faintly visible geometric network, and far along the cylinder, at the very limit of vision, was a band of deeper darkness. It formed a complete circle, rigging the interior of this world, and Norton suddenly recalled the myth of Oceanus, the sea that the ancients believed surrounded the earth. Here, perhaps, was an even stranger sea, not circular, but cylindrical. The fort became frozen in the interstellar night, and it had waves and tides and currents, and fish. The flare died. The moment of revelation was over. On Moon, the members of the Rama Committee relaxed and started to examine the maps and photographs spread in front of them. Commander Norton's voice added a dimension no pictures could convey.
We have now launched 5 long-delayed flares down the axis of the cylinder that will have a good photo coverage of its full length. All the main features are mapped. We've given them provisional names. The interior cavity is 50 kilometers long and 16 wide. The two ends are ball-shaped with rather complicated geometrics. We've called ours the northern hemisphere and are establishing our first base here at the axis. Radiating from the central hub, 3 ladders almost a kilometer long all lead to a ring-shaped plateau. From that, 3 enormous stairways go all the way down to the plane. If you imagine an umbrella with only 3 ribs equally spaced, you'll have a good idea of this endorama. The stairways, what we call them alpha, beta, gamma, are continuous but break in 5 more circular terraces. We estimate there must be between 20 and 30,000 steps. The southern hemisphere looks quite different. It has no stairways and no flat central hub. Instead, there's a huge spike, kilometers long, jutting along the axis with 6 smaller ones around it. The cylindrical section between the 2 poles we call the central plane. It may seem crazy to use the word plane to describe something so obviously curved, but it will appear flat to us when we get down there. The most striking feature of the central plane is the 10-kilometer wide dark band running completely around it at the halfway line. It looks like ice, so we've christened it the cylindrical sea. Right out in the middle, there's a large oval island, about 10 kilometers long and 3 wide, and covered with tall structures. Because it reminds us of old Manhattan, we called it New York. Yet I don't think it's a city. It seems more like an enormous factory or chemical processing plant. But there are some cities, at least 6 of them. If they were built for human beings, they could each hold about 50,000 people. We call them Rome, Peking, Paris, Moscow, London, Tokyo. We've 4,000 square kilometers to explore, only a few weeks to do it in. I wonder if we'll ever learn the answer to the 2 mysteries that have been haunting me ever since we got inside. Who were they? And what went wrong?
We started next door. Dr. Carlisle Pereira began. I think what we have here is a space ark. It is an old idea in the field of exobiology. Some writers suggested that these space arks should be built in the form determination of its orbit and its velocity. We expected that it would be coming from the direction of a nearby star, but that isn't the case at all. It's more than 200,000 years since Rama passed any star. If our present theories of stellar evolution are correct, this star could never have had life-bearing planets. So Rama has been cruising through space for at least 200,000 years, and perhaps for more than a million. Now it's cold, dark, and apparently dead, and I think I know why. No closed ecology can be 100% efficient. There is always waste, loss, some degradation of the environment and buildup of pollutants. It may take billions of years to poison and wear out the planet, but it will happen in the end. Rama is a ship that exhausted its provisions before it reached its goal. Well, I don't pretend to understand what form of automatic guidance is still operating, steering Rama ages after its build is done. And they are dead. I'll stake my reputation on that. All the samples we've taken from the interior are absolutely sterile. For my part, I'm sorry. It would have been wonderful to have met another intelligent species. But at least we have answered one ancient question. We are not alone. The stars will never again be the same to us. Commander Norton was sorely tempted. But as captain, his first duty was to his ship. His second officer, Lieutenant Commander Mercer, was the obvious choice to head the initial probe. The authority on life support systems, Carl Mercer had written some of the standard textbooks on the subject. Given Mercer, that automatically selected the next man, his inseparable companion, Lieutenant Joe Calvert. Years ago, Mercer and Calvert had established an apparently stable liaison, so much so that they shared a wife back on Earth who had borne each of them a child. Two men were not enough for an exploring team, even though it had been found that three was the optimum. For if one man was lost, two might still escape, where a single survivor would be doomed. After a good deal of thought, Norton had chosen Technical Sergeant Willard Martin, a mechanical genius who could make anything work. They drifted through the last airlock and floated out along the wings axis of Rama. There was no reason to choose one ladder rather than another. That nearest airlock Alpha had been selected purely as a matter of convenience. Mercer grasped the first rung and gently propelled himself along the ladder. Movement was as easy as swimming along the seabed. Easy, in fact, for there was no backward drag of water. In his earphones, he could hear the regular breathing of his two companions. It did not take Mercer long to discover that it was impossible at this 1/20th of the gravity level to walk down the stairway in the normal manner. The only practical way was to ignore the steps and to use the handrail to pull oneself down. None of them would admit it, but they all felt like boys again, sliding down the banisters. Mercer glanced up toward the hub of Rama, almost 2 kilometers above him. The little glow of light and the tiny figures silhouetted against it seemed horribly far away.
There's no change in temperature.
He reported to Norton.
Still just below freezing. But the air pressure is up. Even with this low oxygen content, it's almost breathable. Farther down, there'll be no problems at all. In fact, I'm going to take a step.
Mercer equalized pressure, unlatched the security clip of his helmet, and opened it a crack. The air of Rama was dead and musty, as if from a tomb so ancient that the last trace of physical corruption had disappeared ages ago. Mercer could detect no recognizable odors. He sealed the helmet again. Even a mountaineer climbed without revealing who had inspired his particular train of thought. There was no need. They knew each other much too well. On Earth, years ago, in a moment of mutual loneliness, they once made love. Probably they would never repeat the experience, but could one ever be quite sure of that? Yet whenever the well-built surgeon oscillated into the commander's cavity for the fleeting echo of the old passion, she knew that he felt it, and both were happy. "Bill," she began, "I've checked our mountaineers, and here's my verdict. They're in good shape. Based on the assumption that we can dispense with breathing gear below the second level, we need to supply only food and water and thermosuits. Then we're in business. Going down will be easy. That should take about an hour. Climbing up is harder to estimate. I'd like to allow 6 hours, including 2 1-hour periods. What about psychological factors? Hard to assess in such a novel environment. Darkness may be the biggest problem." "Thanks, Laura," said Martin. "And that's all I want to know." In the clear, cold atmosphere of Rome, the beam of the searchlight was completely invisible. 3 kilometers down from the central hub, the 100-meter-wide oval of light lay across a section of that colossal stairway. A brilliant oasis in the surrounding darkness, it was sweeping slowly toward the curved plane, still 5 kilometers below. It had been a completely uneventful descent. They had paused briefly at the second level. Here, they had discarded their oxygen gear and reveled in the strange luxury of being able to breathe without mechanical aids. There was only one more section to go. Gravity had reached almost half its terrestrial value. Rama's centrifugal spin was at last exerting its real strength. Normal walking was now acceptable. Norton had once visited the ruins of an Aztec temple, and the feelings he had then experienced now came echoing back to him, amplified 100 times. Here was the same sense of awe and mystery, and the sadness of the irrevocably vanished past. Yet the scale here was so much greater. Of course, Rama was hundreds of times older than any structure that had survived on Earth. Yet everything looked absolutely new. There was no sign of wear or tear. Norton looked back along the beam, toward its source up on the axis, more than 8 kilometers away. He knew that the crew at the hub would be watching through the telescope. "Captain here," he reported over the radio. "Everyone in fine shape. No problems. Proceeding as planned. It's still very cold, below freezing, and quiet. Quieter than anything I've ever known on Earth or in space. Here every sound is swallowed up. The space around us is so enormous that there aren't any echoes. It's weird, but I hope we get used to it." After those interminable stairs, it was a strange luxury to walk once more on a horizontal surface. They might have been walking along a very wide, shallow valley. It was quite impossible to believe that they were really crawling along the inside of a huge cylinder. And beyond this little oasis of light, the land rose up to meet, no, to become the sky. But they all felt a sense of confidence and subdued excitement. After a while, the almost palpable silence of Rama began to weigh heavily upon them. Every footstep, every word, vanished instantly into the unreverberant void. Their first destination on this initial traverse was a very prominent and rather mysterious feature, which had been christened the Straight Valley. It was a long groove or trench, 40 meters deep and 100 wide, with gently sloping sides. It had been provisionally identified as an irrigation ditch or canal. Like the stairway, it had 2 similar counterparts, equally spaced on the curve of Rama. The 3 valleys were almost 10 kilometers long, and they stopped abruptly just before they reached the sea, which was strange if they were intended to carry water. And on the other side of the sea, Three more 10-kilometer trenches continued on to the region of the South Pole. Filling the bottom of each was a sheet of flat white material that looked much like ice. With Calvert and Rodrigo acting as anchors and playing on a safety rope, Norton rappelled slowly down the steep incline. When he reached the bottom, he found that this material was some kind of glass or transparent crystal. When he touched it with his fingertips, it was cold, hard, and unyielding. Norton tried to peer into the crystalline depths, as one might attempt to gaze through the ice of a frozen lake, but he could see nothing. This stuff was translucent, but not transparent. It now seemed most unlikely that this was a canal. It was simply a peculiar trench that stopped and started abruptly, but led nowhere. And if at any time it had carried liquid, where were the stains, the incrustations of drab sediment that one would expect? Everything was bright and clean, as if the builders had left only yesterday. Once again he was face to face with the fundamental mystery of Rome. There was something very odd indeed about a place that was simultaneously brand new and a million years old.
What is it, Skipper?
Called Rodrigo.
Have you found something?
No,